Today on the Dennis Michael Lynch podcast, Harlan Hill. He was a Democrat, converted over to a Republican, went to be a conservative, and ended up being a surrogate on the Trump team 2020. He is somebody who's been on Fox News a gazillion times, still very active in media. We're going to bring him on to talk about the election, about what's going on with Trump, and all things in America that are upside down. So get ready, because it's all unfiltered.
Dennis Michael Lynch gives you his word, and he will never let you down. He will always fight for America.
The only one who really puts his money where his mouth is Dennis Michael Lynch.
Hello, I'm Dennis Michael Lynch, and I thank you for joining me today. As I said in the introduction, Harlan Hill is a friend of mine. He's been around for a while. In fact, back in 2015, when I was getting my show on Newsmax, I wanted to find people who would be good on television, meaning they were articulate, and were not known. I didn't want to pull the people that you saw on Fox News all the time. So we scoured the YouTube channels, and I found this guy named Harlan Hill. And he was a Democrat, and he looked like a Democrat, and he sounded like a Democrat. And I had him on the show, and then I invited him back a bunch of times. And I remember the owner at Newsmax told me, stop putting him on. He looks too PBS. And that only made me say I'm going to put him on more, which I did. And so Harlan became almost a sidekick for me. And each month closing in on the 2016 election, he wound up becoming more and more conservative sounding. And eventually, he just said to me, you know what? You've convinced me. I'm voting for Trump. So months before we wound up having that election, he was a full-blown Trump supporter. Wound up going on Fox News. I wound up getting him a lot of different appearances on Fox News. Some he got himself. And before you know it, not only did we win the election, but then he and I sort of became partners in doing the podcast. He was my co-host for a while. He kind of served the purpose that Dennis did. And one day we get a phone call, and we're about 9 months into this. We get a phone call, and it is the Trumps. And they just love the fact that he was a Democrat turned conservative. He was a great mouthpiece for Donald J. Trump. And they said, hey, we're going to start early for getting ready for the 2020 campaign, and we'd like you to be on the team. So for a couple of years there, he was always at the White House, always working with the Trump team, doing a lot of stuff. And I was very, very, very proud of him at the time. Still proud of him today. Harlan Hill today is a consultant. He does work with various different campaigns. He helps these people who are running for office. He tries to make it so they can win. He helps them with their marketing strategy and their messaging and their commercials and all that different stuff. And he is actually making a film, which Donald J. Trump will be in. It comes out August 26th. He's going to talk about it today. But I'm going to bring him on here. We're going to have a wide-ranging conversation, which I think you're really going to enjoy, especially if you've been with me since the days of 2015, 2016, and 2017, when he was always on my show or as a co-host. He's really, really a good guy. You're going to like him a lot. So without further ado, here is Harlan Hill. Harlan, it is great to see you. And rumor has it you have a second child on the way. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, we got a baby girl on the way. The first one was a boy, so we've got one of each.
That's fantastic. That is, I mean, I don't have to tell you, greatest thing in the world is having kids. You already know. How old's your son?
He's 15 months now, so he's doing all the fun stuff, but just enough to get into some trouble. Yeah, I'm sure you remember that.
Sure. Now, let me ask you a question. You were a Democrat until I met you, and you were on my television show almost on a daily basis at Newsmax. And slowly but surely, you became not only a Republican, but you became a conservative and a Trump conservative, and went to become a surrogate for Trump in 2020. Will you allow your children to become Democrats?
Well, you know what? I feel like in some ways that political journey that I followed is very natural, right? I mean, everybody talks about it. You know, a lot of people come up and they They're in some ways indoctrinated by the culture that we're in, increasing now more than ever, right? And they have to figure out some things for their own. But I'm going to do everything in my power to give them the right, the foundation that they're conservative. And I also say, I think the Democratic Party today is so much different than the Democratic Party of the Bill Clinton era, right? There are no blue dog Democrats anymore. They are far left Marxist radicals. There's no middle ground anymore. We're the only party that appeals to moderates.
The amazing thing about that is if you go back to when you and I were at Newsmax, when you'd be on my show all the time, when we would have our, let's say, debates, you weren't talking like a radical. You weren't talking like the pink-haired, eyelid pierced ring sort of person that represents the Democrat Party today. You were speaking about things that the JFK Democrats would talk about. And that even, that was even, if you think about it, that was after Obama had spent 7 years. I mean, you were on my show the 8th year of Obama. So then the question becomes, what actually was it that took the party and made it so radical? My personal feeling is that they were so enraged by Trump winning and Hillary losing that the Democrats literally lost their minds. And this radicalization to where you've got Democrats marching in the street in support of Hamas. You've got these crazy, crazy lunatic ideas about open borders and things of that nature. I mean, when I first met you, you weren't sitting in front of me and saying, hey, listen, I'm a Democrat and I think that we should have open borders. No, you were reasonable. What is it in your mind, as somebody who's been in politics your whole adult life, what do you think was the trigger that turned the normal Democrat who used to just fight for, let's say, unions and maybe, the abortion issue has always been a separator? What do you think it was that triggered everybody into becoming absolutely insane to where now Kamala Harris is deemed to be a great goddess of Democrats?
Well, I mean, there's no question that I think Trump played a role. This Trump derangement syndrome is a real thing, but I think it goes beyond that. The Democratic Party of yesteryear would speak truth to power. They were skeptical of big corporate interests like big tech and defense contractors. They were generally more hesitant to involve the United States in foreign wars. They even going back to the 90s, I think were more receptive to the idea that we needed to secure our borders. And they viewed that in economic terms. I mean, you touched on it with unions, right? The labor market is fundamentally no different than any others. The laws of supply and demand exist there. And if you import endless labor into the United States, it is naturally going to depress wages. That's just a reality. And that's what we've done. And now it's on turbo drive. It's crazy. And I don't even think we have real numbers to substantiate exactly how big this problem is. And so a Democratic Party that would be really interested in the plight of the worker and their ability to make ends meet and to afford housing and food and all that, they would look at this and say, why are we bringing in all these people to compete with Native American workers? And when I say Native American workers, I'm not talking about white Americans. I'm talking about everyone, right? The African American population that's been here for centuries, the Latino population that's been here for generations, right? People, the Americans of European descent. You would want to protect their interest and to protect their ability to earn a living and to raise a family. The Democratic Party is totally uninterested in that today. And this is an international phenomenon. I mean, you look at the riots that are unfolding in the UK right now. It's across the Western world. They have turned their backs on the populations of their own country to service the interests of people that are not from here and don't believe the same things that you and I do. And this is not a race issue. It's not. And it never has been. It is an issue of putting the citizens of your country first and foremost, as it always should have been in any republic.
You know, there's endless videos, and there's one in particular. I think it was when he was still a senator. I don't think he had become vice president yet, but Joe Biden is speaking to a room filled with Democrat donors, and he's explaining to them, he's justifying why it is that he voted for the Fence Act, which was a policy put into place during George W. Bush. And he was explaining that they're sending over, it almost sounded like Trump's escalator speech. He said they're bringing over criminals, they're sending over gang members, they're sending over cartel, and they're stealing jobs. These are criminal people. They're stealing jobs, they're stealing IDs, they're raping women. And even when you go back and you look at Bill Clinton's State of the Union, I'm not sure which one exactly it was. Obviously, he had a few. But if you were to take out that Southern twang, you would swear to God he was reading from a Trump doctrine, saying the same thing, that these people were stealing jobs and doing it ever. I think from the standpoint of immigration, which obviously is a topic I love, I think Barack Obama, when he told us that he was going to fundamentally transform the country, he really meant it. And if you think about what transformation isn't you can get an abortion on a national level and now you could only get it in certain states. That's a change of policy. Transformation is if Dennis wants to become Denise or Harlan wants to become Helen. That is a fundamental transformation. So when you look at the fundamental transformation that Obama was talking about, I truly believe he never got to where he wanted to be, because you may recall when he first got into office, he focused in on Obamacare. And I think he did that because he was a rookie and he didn't understand enough. He got that through. And then when it came to immigration, obviously the complexity of the chambers switched. Republicans started to take over and he couldn't get anything through. So his immigration reform, which was to just change fundamentally this country, couldn't take shape. And so what he's done now through proxy is he has put in Biden, but it's his rule. And so I think that the immigration that we have seen into this country, which is neck breaking for especially somebody like myself, who I thought I had seen it all, Harlan, making 4 films. I'm in my 4th one. And we're going to talk about films in a bit because you got a really exciting film coming out. But my 4th one, which was made just before the election of 2020, I had said in there that if Joe Biden wins, we're going to have open borders like nothing we've ever seen. And I called it right. And I think what we're looking at today, we're on the cusp of becoming the UK. When you're looking at, and we covered this on yesterday's show on Monday, when you look at the videos that are happening in the streets of the UK, the people of London are finally starting to fight back. I think the rebellion there may even get worse. Their entire country has gone from, a Christian-based country to now it's Muslim. I mean, the number one name for a new baby boy in the UK is Muhammad. And, now you've got this unruliness and it's turning to become an Islamic state. The question becomes, how long until that happens in our country? Maybe not so much with Islam, but definitely with, the Hispanic heritage. Now, I don't have a problem with Hispanics at all, but I do have a problem when my son's school no longer has football as the homecoming game, but has it as soccer, because soccer is the dominating sport, which happened to my son's high school. So, pretty soon it's going to be, you don't have hamburgers and hot dogs on 4th of July. It's got to be Taco Tuesday. And I say that in jest and joking around, but I think people know what I'm talking about. You walk into almost any store these days, and the English language is not spoken first and foremost. You go on a construction site, or you even go outside to speak to your landscaper, and if you don't have knowledge of the Spanish, language, you're screwed.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there. I mean, I guess I'll take it from the top. The I think most shocking development in the Democratic Party since I was a Democrat has been this acceleration to destroy the family unit. There's always been an element of that. You've seen they did it to Black communities, and you've seen the consequences of that. But it's trickled down to everything. This is the prevailing ideology. This is familiar too. If you studied Marxism, I mean, you've got to separate children from their parents at school to be able to indoctrinate them. You don't need parents asking too many questions. Now, in certain parts of the country, children can begin to transition under the supervision of their teachers and school administrators without the parents getting any sort of notification or playing any role in that. They do it in secret behind the parents' backs. This is worse than what's happening in Europe, actually, I think. I mean, they have different problems. As you said, Muhammad's the most common name of baby boys born in the UK. This is different. They don't have this same sort of gender ideology. In fact, they reject it at scale. Maybe some of that is actually because they have large Muslim communities there that just don't believe it. I mean, they see that it's crazy.
Yep.
But if they succeed in this, and I don't think that they are, I actually think public opinion is turning against this. I think it has turned against this. People don't like the idea of their daughter having to compete against a biological male, to literally take blows from men that had testosterone pumping through their brain their entire teenage years, right? With muscle mass that's greater than the average woman. They don't like the idea of their young daughter having to change in a girl's locker room next to a man with his penis out. Excuse my language, but it's just. I mean, my grandfather's generation, if this had happened, I feel like there would have been an open revolt. It's unthinkable. Even my parents' generation, right? I mean, your generation, if this had happened in the 90s, it would be unthinkable. If you had time traveled back to the 90s and you said this is what's happening, they wouldn't believe you. They think you're crazy. So yeah, it's unprecedented. It's almost a uniquely American phenomenon, though there are elements of it across the West. But moving on from the family unit, to talk about the Obama years, which I think we're still in, right? I mean, you saw the coup that Obama ran in secret against the president of the United States, Joe Biden. It's apparent this guy still has his claws in the government. And really what's happened now is that the president of the United States is just a figurehead. They can swap him in and out. They don't need to go through a primary. They don't even need votes cast, whatever. That doesn't really matter. You have a permanent class in Washington that actually control the levers of power. And much like a king or a queen, the president is just largely a figurehead. So it doesn't matter, if Kamala doesn't work, they'll just swap Kamala out and promote Shapiro or whomever it is. Like that's they've now figured this out. Like you don't even need to run a real campaign. And the permanent class in Washington, including Barack Obama, can control the levers of power with no accountability, right? You can't. There are so many people. There are hundreds of thousands of people across the federal government that are making decisions that impact every American every day, and there's zero accountability because they all have plausible deniability. It's impossible that somebody commits a crime at whatever agency. Well, there was some misunderstanding. There are a bunch of people. There's a long investigation. Nothing ever happens. And I put some of the blame for this at the feet of Republicans in Congress because they haven't held feet to the fire. The part of the purpose of Congress is to perform oversight on the federal government. And yeah, they put out nice press releases and they make statements from the podium, but nothing ever happens. And it's starting to feel more and more like with the exception of a few great Republicans, President Trump has been able to break through. Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida has been able to break through. In some cases, though he's not perfect, Governor Abbott in Texas, has done some things. But it's it almost blackpills you. It almost makes you feel like, can we even save this thing? Because they're playing a game that's much more sophisticated than we are. We still, as Republicans, I think, believe naively that we're playing by the same rules of the 1980s and 1990s, and that's not the case anymore. We're fighting against Marxists that are looking to destroy everything, and to rebuild it in their image. There's one more thing on that, actually. Let me just say, I just got back from San Francisco. And I've been going to San Francisco for over a decade. And every time I go back, it is so much worse than it was the time before. I'm talking about on Market Street there, going through San Francisco. Which is the main street in San Francisco. There are literally miles of homeless people passed out, doing drugs, defecating on the sidewalks. It's disgusting. It is so third world. I don't think people appreciate. You see, but news reports. You might see video on YouTube. You don't realize how bad it is until you actually go. And that's what they want. Like, San Francisco's always been on the bleeding edge of liberal ideology. That's what they want for the entire country. And it's played out even in red states, in Dallas, even, you have a lot of homeless people in the streets. And it's just total lawlessness. I get a parking ticket for parking 2 minutes beyond the expiration of the parking meter. Meanwhile, 10 feet away, there's a guy defecating on the sidewalk with no consequence. It's anarcho-tyranny is the term that is used to describe it. It's so oppressive. We attack and punish law-abiding citizens for minor infractions, or even not even an infraction, something that's cooked up by the government, while leftists are able to act with impunity.
If you look and listen to what you just said, I really think it rolls back to what, the question I asked you was, how and when did this all happen? And it happened so quickly to where victims have become criminals and criminals have become victims. And it wasn't like that during Trump. And even to his defense, I won't say it was fully like that under Obama. I mean, no doubt Obama was pushing for Black Lives Matter, telling the people of Ferguson, don't give up, keep on going. Maybe that was the beginning of it. Maybe we didn't know what we were seeing when we were watching it, that this beginning of the criminal is the victim and the victim is the criminal. But going back to a couple of things you had said, and I wrote it down, I mean, think about what you said about, these days you can be, look what just happened in the Olympics. You've got these guys who are pummeling these women, and it's justified and it's allowed. It's allowed here in the United States as well. It's allowed on the wrestling teams. It's allowed in all the different sports. And the crazy thing about that is, if I went back to high school and I thought about what was going on there, if I had a problem with somebody, I'd go to fisticuffs with a guy in a second. But if I would have punched a woman in the face, I would have not only been arrested, kicked out of school, but every single last guy in the world and woman in the world would have called me, well, they would have called me a different word I won't use here. Starts with a P and it rhymes like a cat. But I mean, they would basically say that I was a loser, right? And I would be. If I went home today and I punched my wife in the face, I would be locked up because you're not supposed to do that. And on top of that, to a woman. But just because or if I would have walked into the girls' locker room in high school and ripped out my pecker and walked around, same thing. I would have been reprimanded horribly. Today, we're actually encouraging it to happen. But they still draw the line, Harlan. If you punch your wife in the face, you're going to go to jail. But If you do it in the means of sports, you're okay. If you go and commit a crime today and you think to yourself, oh my God, I'm going to spend the next 2 years in prison, all you have to do is stand in front of the judge and tell him that, the reason why you committed that crime is because you really identify as a woman and you'd like to go to a female prison, and they're going to send you to the female prison. So nothing makes sense. And it's getting to the point of where you just say to yourself, how did this start? And more importantly, how can it stop? And that's an important part that we need to discuss today, because you talked about the election. I truly believe that Donald J. Trump is still the president of the United States. I believe that there was shenanigans, is the word I use it. I believe there were shenanigans in 2020. I believe there's going to be shenanigans now. And, you're more tuned into this than I am, because I've largely I've distanced myself from Washington, D.C. and, Fox Media and all the other different medias. I just do my own thing. And I look at Lara Trump sitting there in the RNC, and I say, what is she going to do to stop the illegal aliens from voting? There was just a huge video, I'm sure you saw it floating around online, of the Heritage Foundation, their oversight project. They went down to Georgia. They film this one industrial park where these people live, and 14% of the people in Georgia who were illegal aliens who they interviewed all said that they were registered to vote. We got to assume and take them on their word. If you extrapolate that out, that makes it about 45 to 48,000 people in Georgia who potentially will be registered to vote if it's at 14%. And meanwhile, Biden theoretically won the state by 12,000. So we're in a big problem there. We still have the COVID rules of these mail-in ballots, and you said it yourself. The Republicans are still playing on the field as if the rules are dating back to Reagan days, when Reagan and Tip O'Neill would go have a cocktail and work things out in the middle of Washington, D.C. Today, we're playing against thieves, George Soros, and DAs who go after you for that parking ticket you got. They want to put you in jail for 30 years. How is it? Do you know anything that's happening at the RNC or the GOP level to where our team is saying, if we're going to win this, we're going to have to fight fire with fire, or are we still going on the honesty policy?
That's a tough question. That's a tough question. Because, yeah, I once again, I hear that we're doing a lot of things. It's kind of like what I was talking about with the oversight from Congress. We hear a lot of nice words. I don't have a good feeling about it.
Neither do I.
And, back when we used to do Unfiltered. You mean the
Newsmax show?
The Newsmax show.
Yeah. But not everybody knows the name of it, but yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
We realized that 2016 was a turning point. We felt like if we didn't win this, things could get really bad. And I think now, post 2020, we've seen just how bad things can get and how quickly they can get that way. But I think it's totally different now. I don't think the stakes are no longer, hey, we could have mass migration. Oh, we could have a tumultuous economy. What's happened actually is that we could lose the republic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We could lose the Supreme Court. Which is the last independent body of oversight and accountability left in this country. You lose that, then these Marxists can act with total impunity. They're trying to lock the president of the former president of the United States up, the leader of the opposition party. I mean, if your alarm bells aren't going off, well, I think we're just so desensitized because there's so much craziness happening every time we turn around that, they tried to lock him up. Oh yeah, they shot him. Okay. Yeah. Just like it's normal. No, this is profoundly different than when we were doing the Newsmax show.
What you're saying right now, I feel as if you're inside my bedroom when I'm talking to my wife on Pillow Talk, because this is you don't have a hidden camera in my bedroom or anything, do you?
No, not my thing.
Okay, good. Because this is the conversation. This is the conversation we just had. And, because my wife said to me, she says, why do you think Putin gave over these hostages? And I said, I know why he gave over the hostages. He doesn't want Trump. He needs Biden and Harris. He needs Harris to win. And so what he's going to do is he's going to throw Biden and Harris a bone, something for them to talk about as an advancement, something for them to be proud about and put on the stump. And that's Putin's way of doing a sacrifice to try to get him to get Harris elected. He doesn't want Trump in there. And, when you look at the way things are in this country, like you just said, Donald J. Trump is going to be sentenced in September, another conversation that's worthy of you and I having, for basically recording a check to his lawyer as a legal expense. Think about that. He owes $500,000 to the state of New York for putting an estimate that he put a disclosure on that you should do your own due diligence to his properties, something that every American has had to do if you're going to do a refinance, if you're going to get insurance. The insurance companies, the mortgage companies, the banks, they all say, hey, we're good with his numbers. He didn't screw us, yet he's still got to pay a fine. He's got a woman he pays $90 million out to because she says that he touched him, but she can't remember where she was or when it was or what she was wearing. And the stuff that she says she thinks she was wearing wasn't even manufactured yet. So to your point, if you're not looking at this and screaming out loud what's going on, another thing too, he just got shot at. If that was Barack Obama who got shot at and shot in a year, we would still have a ongoing massive investigation that every single day was on the cover of the New York Times until we got to the answer of it. Nobody's even talking about it anymore. It's blown off as if it was just like somebody, bumped into the back of the motorcade. We are losing everything that our fathers and grandfathers fought for in this country. And I don't see the Republicans doing a damn thing. I just listened. I don't know if you saw it. I don't know if you listened to it or not. It happened in April, but I only just listened to it last week. Tucker Carlson was on with Joe Rogan. And, one of the questions, Harlan, I've always been asked since the days of my Fox News and Newsmax and even doing all the stuff on Facebook is why doesn't anybody ever get held accountable in Washington, D.C.? And I said, look, the only thing you're ever going to get in Washington, D.C. are these hearings because they're great sound bites for C-SPAN and Fox News and for Twitter. I said, but you never watch anybody get in trouble because every single Republican is afraid that once he or she goes a little bit too far, that all of a sudden, before you know it, there's child porn on their laptop. And that's exactly what it is that Tucker said. And I was like, wow, I've been saying this forever. And somebody else who I really respect is confirming that. And so it's really hard. I mean, I know people want you and I to give them some hope here. And we're going to talk in a couple of minutes about Trump's strategy. And then, of course, the documentary that you've got going. But I mean, it's a little disheartening, especially when you look at all things that just happened yesterday on Monday. Stock market crashing, not only here in the U.S., but around the world. You've got, more people have credit card debt than ever before. People aren't able to pay their mortgages. Interest rates are skyrocketing. You got open borders. I mean, Harlan, everybody is stretched to the point of where they just can't take it anymore. And, they look at people like you. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, you're in your mid 30s, right?
33.
33. So, you're 33, I'm 55. I mean, we look to people like you. You're the next generation of leadership. And so I'm going to put you on the spot here. If you just gave one thing other than we've got to vote for Trump, if you gave just one thing that you think needs to happen here in the country to make things drive in another direction, what do you think this country needs to be working on right now? So this way, by the time you're somebody who's 55 years old and maybe you run for president, what would your agenda be?
That's a great question. What I've learned traveling around the country is that there are a lot of people that think just like you and me, and they probably have similar backgrounds to us. And they're mad about the direction of the country, but they're not even registered to vote. They're not even registered to vote. Let's just focus on one demographic: non-college educated males. Regardless of your race, you have been disproportionately affected by illegal immigration, both economically and in terms of the security of your community and your family. You've been, you're disproportionately affected by this radical ideology because you probably send your kids to public school, people in this demographic. You're disproportionately affected by all the problems that plague us. The ability to put food on the table. These are working class Americans, and they just don't vote. So I think if there's one thing, and there are people in your family, I guarantee you, because I see the stats on this, and we're actually working on a project in one of the battleground states. I can't get into too much detail, but we're working in one of the battleground states, and we're looking to expand it to some of the others to register these people, to hyper focus on this group. And there are voters in the battleground states: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Those 3 states, we win them. And there are a lot of these types of voters that I'm talking about in those states that have never voted, that are mad about the direction of things, probably won't vote unless something changes. So it's not just that the usual suspects, people like us that are politically engaged, that vote, need to turn out and vote. It's that we need to think about who's in our network and register them, get them to actually make them, call them up and say, like, I'm going to help you figure this out. Anything short of this, I mean, if you're one of these people that I'm describing and you don't get out and vote, I fear that the direction of this country means that the solution to this problem is going to be something that none of us like. So this is your chance to forestall that. I'd rather us vote at the ballot box than see the dissolution of this country. I love America. I grew up. I mean, you got the flag out in front of the house. I believe in the purpose of this country that our forefathers fought and died for. And I worry that if we don't take advantage of the systems they put in place, that future generations will have to fight and die to save it. Not something people want to hear, but the solution is very simple. There are several million people in this country that are mad about the direction of things, but they just don't vote. And there are a variety of reasons for that. One of them is that they think that their vote doesn't matter, that the whole system's rigged anyway. We got to try anyway. This is our last chance. So, long way of saying, we need to focus less on like just tweeting and putting stuff on Instagram and Facebook. Pick up the phone, call your brother-in-law, your sister-in-law, your cousins. Say, I know things aren't good. I know you feel the pinch every time, you're at the checkout line at the grocery store, or you're filling up the pump. Every time your daughter goes out, you're worried, is she going to be the next one that gets murdered while on a run, at the hands of an illegal immigrant? I know you're worried about these things, but what are you going to do about it?
It's a shame that in this day and age, we're still talking about people who don't get out and vote for whatever their reason is. And you are right. I mean, it is a widespread problem. When you look at the amount of votes that were cast and the amount of people that are in the country, you say, where are those other 100 million people? And, I don't think people recognize the abyss that we're staring down. And I think one of the reasons why maybe they discount it, and people like myself, I'll take some blame here, because every election that we've had up to this one has always been anointed as, this is the most important election of our lifetime. This is the most important election of our lifetime. And we're always saying the same thing. And it's hard when you keep on crying wolf for somebody to believe that this is the most important election of our lifetime. But I think the things that we've seen over the past 4 years are indicative of this really is the most important election of our lifetime. When you look at what was done to this country during COVID, the fact that it was allowed to happen where people were forced into getting a vaccine, people were forced to stay in their homes, people were forced to lose their businesses. We walked around, well, although I never did, with masks on, and you couldn't, you had to let your mom or your dad die in a hospital room by themselves. It was insane. And now when you look at what's happening on a global scale with Russia aligning with Iran and Russia aligning with China, I mean, the wagons are circling us in a way that has never been done before. We got spy balloons coming over the United States. Our borders are wide open, even though we know that 9/11 is an invite for every single last terrorist to come through the border. We're allowing it to happen unchecked. When you look at all this, if you think you're struggling now with the price of food and the price of gasoline and the price of insurances, wait until she gets in, because she has already vowed that what she's going to do is she's going to basically eliminate the Trump tax cuts for businesses like myself who are now paying 21%. She's going to put them back up to 35. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay people off, or I'm going to cut their salaries, or to be quite honest, I'm going to close up shop and I'm going to retire instead of putting any more energy into that. So what we are looking at if she wins is Armageddon to the nth degree. And so one of the things that we get back, Harlan, and we just ran a poll last night on our website on the DML News app about, a lot of complaints I'm getting today is Trump needs to focus in on the problems facing Americans instead of focusing in on what Kamala Harris's race is or is not. Focus in more on what she's going to do to the United States of America instead of the word salad videos that make everybody laugh or cringe. And for those people who don't know, I mean, I mentioned it at the top when I was introducing you, you were actually a surrogate for Trump in 2020. You just sat down with Trump for your documentary, which again, we're going to talk about at the end of the program here. But when you look at what he's doing, I know people say Trump needs to be Trump, but I mean, really 110% honesty. Do you think his approach right now is the best approach, or is he falling back into old habits that made people not like him?
So let's just focus on that one example of the National Association of Black Journalists. I'm not sure whether it was intentional or whether it was just a coincidence. But one thing that Trump did there, and he has shown that he was able to do this in the past, is he was able to change the national conversation. It was not, as it had been for about 10 days, how great Kamala Harris is and all of that. He actually was able to change the national conversation. And maybe that wasn't the best way to do it, but it succeeded.
Meaning, I just want for people who didn't watch it, you're talking about Trump was invited to an organizational sort of event where it was black journalists. He sat down. ABC was half hour late. ABC black journalist female gets up there and starts attacking him without even saying hello about why it is that he is focusing in on these negative comments about various different people. Why does he continue to do that? And one of the things she brought up was about Kamala Harris's race. And what he did is he started questioning whether or not she really was indeed black. You're saying that although not the nicest way and best squeaky clean way of doing it, he did change the conversation from Kamala Harris has nothing but squeaky clean background to, hey, let's look at Kamala Harris for who she is and who she isn't. So you're saying it was a good thing, although done maybe not in the best of ways?
Well, so basically the question was essentially, prove to me you're not racist, because you seem pretty racist to me. And his response was, well, isn't it interesting that Kamala Harris never embraced the fact that she was African American? She was always the first Indian American senator, and that was the one that she emphasized. She always sort of downplayed the African American side until it was politically expedient. Well, maybe there's something you should be asking her there. Yeah, maybe, at this point, in terms of his ability to manipulate the media, I can't really second guess President Trump on that anymore. And I think that it was a turning point. We changed the conversation. Maybe that's a short-term hit you take. Now we have pivoted. The world is really unstable, and I think that she's not going to be able to ride that high that she was for 10 days anymore.
So if I'm reading this correctly from you, you're saying let Trump be Trump and have faith that whether it is by design or by chance, there's going to be a bigger result, whether it's by plan or by happenstance. There's a bigger result. And so the silver lining to his keeping it up is it changes the national conversation to where now with the honeymoon being over, you got your $300 million. Everybody says you're the cat's meow, but you know what? You're a freaking liar. And so now what he did is he put water on the fire. There's still a little bit of smoke, but now maybe we can start, especially with what happened yesterday on Monday with the stock market crashing. And, Zelensky just flew 2 F-16s that he's going to start using for, to attack Russia. We've got Iran and Israel about to just be a freaking, who knows where that's going. And then, of course, China is on the doorstep of Taiwan. We should be addressing these sort of things. We haven't been. And so what you're saying is the national conversation now is headed into the right direction. Okay, so I'll give you that one. Do you think it would be wise of him at this point now to start talking solely about what he's going to do for the United States of America and what it is that she would be doing for the United States of America? Because what I think you should do is the next time you go to San Francisco, you should be filming that Market Street, giving it over to Trump and saying, make a 30-second commercial on this. Let people see what Kamala Harris creates.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I think that's where they're going. This was a big and unprecedented political realignment. I mean, you had a coup against the sitting president of the United States by the former president of the United States, Barack Obama, and they elevated somebody that is generally accepted to be lackluster, unlikable, not particularly intelligent. And there was a coordinated media effort to basically reinvent her. And it was an extraordinary rollout. I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen, it was probably the best political rollout of a candidate ever. Even better than Barack Obama, because Barack Obama was a slow build, right? They rolled him out at the DNC, they ran him for Senate. I mean, it happened really fast by historical standards, but Kamala Harris happened in 24 hours.
Yeah.
And it was a total reinvention of her. And so the bump, the honeymoon, as you described it, that she was going to get was always going to happen. And I think Trump is getting his sea legs in this new terrain, this new environment that we're in. I think they're figuring out what works and what doesn't. And I think that there is going to be a pivot to issues. And part of that will be driven by the Trump campaign. But I think that part of that will also be driven by the seriousness of the issues that are in front of us, as you laid out. The world's on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And it's coming to our shores. It's already here.
Of course. And
the economic conditions of this country have not been good for a long time. They've been able to paper that over with data that is just ridiculous. They'll post like a good jobs number and then they'll revise it down, the next month. And this has been happening over and over and over again. It makes you think that it's an entirely fraudulent system that we're living in.
Harlan,
and
I mean, let me just insert here for a second, because I think you just brought up something very important. It goes back to what you and I just talked about, and I don't think either one of us provided a really great answer. We should probably try to do a little better on this. I only got you for a couple more minutes, so it won't go too deep. But Harlan, we were lied to about COVID We were lied to about Benghazi. We were lied to about Fast and Furious. We were lied about Obamacare. We've been lied about to the jobs numbers. They're always getting revised. We've been lied to about every single last thing, Russia collusion, you name it. But we're told that the 2020 election was up and up and that Trump is spreading the big lie. So the Democrat Party, who constantly, and the media who constantly lie to every single last person in this country, we're supposed to believe that the one time they decided to tell the truth is the one time that they wanted to get rid of the guy that they can't stand so much that they actually have a Trump disorder, a syndrome named after it. They try to put him in jail for the things that we just talked about, which are basically misdemeanors at best, even if a crime. We're supposed to believe that? It's impossible to believe. It's impossible to believe. And so that's why everybody sits here on eggshells. I mean, Harlan, we still don't even know what's going to happen to this man come September. That kangaroo court may actually tell him to report to Rikers Island right now. I mean, what happens then? I mean, this country's headed towards civil war, if you ask me. And you've known me now for a very long time. I don't speak like that. I mean, that's where we're sort of headed. Comment on that with you, and then let's go to the documentary.
Yeah, you have to remember back after Trump won in 2016, there were a chorus of Democrats, both elected and also influential people in Hollywood, that openly questioned the election, the outcome of the election in 2016. Obviously the Russian collusion stuff, but they were also talking about voting machines and all of that. And there was no blowback. It's like, yeah, in America, you can say whatever you want. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In 2020, we actually have evidence, like hard evidence of ballot harvesting in these drop boxes and the mail-in voting where people are getting 20 ballots to their house. We actually have hard evidence of this, that this was happening. Now, we don't have hard evidence of like how people cast ballots and all of that because we can't trace the individual ballots back to people. But we do have hard evidence of shenanigans. And then they crack down on us in a way that's never happened before. They knew that if people realized how illegitimate these elections were, that the whole thing would come crumbling down like a house of cards. But it's not just isolated to the election. We all know what happened then. Why don't we know anything about the guy that tried to blow Donald Trump's head off? We don't know anything about him. Like, there's been a blackout on this, and we once again have hearings on the Hill, and they're asking tough questions, but nobody's held accountable. And the figurehead at the top from PepsiCo, like, she resigned. Okay. But this Democratic lackey that stepped in as acting director is the same thing, if not worse, and was probably the guy calling the shots from the beginning the whole time because he's a Democratic operative. Mm-hmm. But now he's in charge, actually. And he was the whole time, but now he's actually the figurehead as well. And time and time again, the American people and the populist right have been railroaded. We demand answers to these questions. We're given lip service by those in charge. And it makes you wonder whether some of these Republicans that are in charge are complicit.
Oh my God! Listen, when you get back from this whole film and everything else, I gotta have you when you're in Florida again. You gotta come here and we gotta sit down and do this for like 3 hours, like a Rogan sort of style. We'll break open a bottle of wine because like one of the things I can't understand about Trump and his strategy is. Marco Rubio was one of the finalists for VP. And I sit there and I say to myself, what is he thinking? I mean, this is a guy who wanted full-fledged amnesty in 2013. I did a whole film about this. Hannity gave me a whole hour on it. I mean, Marco Rubio is Mr. Amnesty. He and Rubio hated each other during 2016. Rubio clearly doesn't like him, but because he's a politician, he'll just pretend as if it never happened. And that's why I don't trust Rubio. I don't trust Cruz. I don't trust Lindsey Graham. I don't trust any of these people who have said such disgusting things about him time and time again. And here we are. And now all of a sudden, these are his buddies. To me, you can't trust a guy like that. They'll stab you in the back when you're looking the other way. That's why I would have liked to have seen Trump pick Dr. Ben Carson, because he knows he was never going to get stabbed. We would have had a little black demographic behind us a little bit. And, you know, Carson has never said anything really detrimental about him before. So I don't understand Trump's strategy quite often. And I understand he's dealing with a party that wants him dead as much as the Democrats do. And I truly believe that. I truly believe the majority, if you would have asked the majority, with the exception of a few, if you would have asked the majority of the Republicans quietly and they never had to reveal their true answer to anybody else but you, they would say, I can't wait for the day that Trump is done. And the reason being is because Trump's the one guy who wants to change the system back to the kind of system that you and I want to have and the kind of system that our grandfathers had. And they don't want that. And the question becomes, why don't they want that? That's the part I can never understand. Now, with that being said, I'm going to lose you because you got a flight to catch. Let's talk about this for a second. We know that one of the big problems in the country, Harlan, is the media. And the government itself, the Department of Defense, is spending billions of dollars to make sure that people like you and I never have any advertisements on our website, never have a chance to grow our businesses or what we're trying to tell people, which is the truth. So they try to kill us as much as they possibly can in the wallet, and it's a struggle. I've been struggling in this business for 10 years, and I stick with it because it's a business of love. You, same thing. You've been in this business, and now you're to the point of where you're doing what I used to do, which is making documentaries. You have a new documentary. You actually recently sat down with Trump. You interviewed him. I saw the trailer, but we can't show the trailer yet, or I should say I've seen a couple of parts of the Trump part. What you said that you never seen Trump sounding and looking better than when you saw him last week. Give me what your impression was with Trump. What is this movie about? Where's it going to be? And what's the objective overall?
So I saw him it was about 24 hours after Joe Biden stepped aside. And I guess it was probably about a week and a half or so after he had been shot. So really interesting timing. And I seen him periodically, and I think he knows actually how serious this is.
When you say this, what do you mean by this?
The predicament that this country is in. He knows the stakes. He realizes how serious this is. And I think that this isn't a selfish Donald Trump. He's gotten a reputation for that. That's how it's been. I got the sense and I got the feeling from him, and I'm not talking about when the cameras were rolling. I'm talking about when we're talking before and after, that he's not fighting for his life, though he is. That was never. He's fighting for his grandchildren's lives. This is real. He is in a totally different headspace. He has been calm and collected, and he was very thoughtful. He wasn't just going on these tangents or whatever. He was very focused. And I actually got a glimpse of that when I saw him the time before, at the beginning of the year. It's gotten more and more pronounced. This guy's focused, and he's calm, and he's ready to win. And that's not to say that he doesn't feel like he's not he's not boastful. He's not taking this for granted. He knows that he's going to have to put up a fight. And he was, as we were in the room, he was soliciting advice, actually. You know, he gets a reputation for being boisterous. This is a guy that does a lot of listening. He wants to kind of take a lot of people's temperatures, and he figures out what's going on. He's not just listening to the people that work for him and living in a bubble, which I think is something that he probably learned from his time in the White House, where they create this bubble around the president. No, he's interested in soliciting a lot of different ideas and developing a worldview and an approach to problems based on that. So my takeaway was that this President Trump, if we can get him in the White House, will be so much more effective than he was the first go around, because he understands how Washington works. He understands how they try to manipulate you and to craft your worldview as you live in this presidential bubble. That's why the Democrats are so scared of a second term of President Trump.
Of course.
Because he's going to be ruthlessly effective, more focused, and because they tried to take away his businesses, his life, they've targeted his family, including his children, going after his 18-year-old son, his grandkids, going after his supporters and locking them up in prison with no due process. He fully realizes and appreciates the stakes that of this election. And that gives me actually, Dennis, a lot of hope.
Well, let me say something before you get into the movie part, because what you said there is just, I mean, you had me mesmerized. I agree with you. I mean, if there was one thing about Trump that's always sort of pissed me off a little bit, I mean, I voted for the guy twice. I'm going to vote him for 3 times. I lost my job on Newsmax in part because I was always fighting for him. Yeah, what a great fun that was, you and I that night, right? but the one knock I've always had on him is that I've always said, man, I wish he'd love the country as much as he loves himself. And I agree with you. There's something about him. I mean, he still has the ego and he still has the fun and he still got the sharpness. And I love that part about him. I don't want him to lose that. But there's something about him that's been humbled, not just because he almost was killed, but because I think he realizes at 78 years old, he's in the last chapters, right? And I mean, if he's so lucky to live to 90, he's got 12 years left. It's not a whole lot of time. And so I think he understands at this point that instead of trying to build his popularity and, you know, his #1 status, I think it's more about, let me build my legacy. And my legacy is only as good as this country is. If this country can't survive, nobody's going to give a rat's ass about my legacy. And I care about my kids and my grandkids and all the things that you just pulled out. And I think he understands, whether he gets his head up on Mount Rushmore or not, that what he can really leave behind versus casinos and buildings and wealth and television shows is that he could leave behind a country that he loved. And I'm with you. I think this man winning would be the greatest single 4 years we've ever seen in America. The question is whether or not we could get there. So you have a film. It's coming out on August 26th. It's a documentary. I saw in it so far that you've got Steve Bannon is in there and Trump is in there and Mark Meadows is in there. What's the premise of the movie? When's it coming out exactly? Where's it going to be? And how can people see it?
Right. And this is really the first place I've discussed this publicly. We're going to have a big rollout, and I actually can't get into the exact details of that rollout yet, but it's pretty exciting. Okay. It's pretty exciting stuff, and it's going to be available everywhere for free. Not trying to make any money on this. We want this to be part of the national conversation about what has happened to this country.
So when you say it's going to be everywhere, do you mean it's going to be on Rumble and Facebook and Twitter and
everywhere?
Okay, everywhere. Okay, everywhere. So you can see it everywhere.
There's the premise of it quickly is that there's been this convergence of the military industrial complex and the woke industrial complex that has fundamentally compromised our military readiness. You got trans service members that were spending $250,000 a person to transition and then having to support them medically for life. And we're not getting any sort of tangible benefit. The military is not getting any sort of tangible benefit. These people can't serve, right? I mean, they have ongoing medical problems. And the word is now out, hey, if you join the military, we'll pay for everything. We'll castrate you, whatever you need, and you're covered for life through the VA. We have basically eroded all of the fundamental requirements of the Department of Defense to prioritize the national defense of this country. And this is happening with the backdrop of an increasingly unstable world. So you've got war brewing in the Middle East, you've got war on the European continent, and then you have a U.S. military, which under the Biden and Harris administration has actively worked from putting trans people in the military to COVID vaccine mandates that are forcing out conservative members, to targeting any members that fly the Gadsden flag or wear a MAGA hat in their free time, to root them out of the military. And the military has been distracted and focused on these wrong issues to fight a culture war, and it is already costing American lives. And we tell that through the stories of the 13 fallen Marines at Abbey Gate during the Afghanistan withdrawal in 2021. We have their families. They tell riveting inside stories about how dire the situation was on the ground as they heard from their loved ones as they served, and the utter lack of respect and contempt that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris had for them as their sons and daughters came home from Afghanistan.
Sounds very powerful, and it's going to be ready on the 26th. Are you allowed to say the name of the movie or no?
Culture War.
It's called Culture War. Okay. And I'm sure that you are going to be screaming out loud, leading the days up to that. And
we'll circle up around that time. It'd be great.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Listen, Harlan, I wish I had you for more time. We could probably do this for 3-4 hours. When you're in Florida, please reach out to me and you come over here and we'll have a lot of fun. And again, reach out to me around the 26th and we'll do whatever we can, including if you want to put it up on my Facebook page. I'd be more than willing to play the movie up on my Facebook page. Probably be taken down, but we'll see what happens. Harlan Hill, how can people follow you?
You can get me on Twitter at Harlan, Harlan.
All right, but you could probably sell that for a lot of money now.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, Harlan, stay well, buddy. We got it. Bye-bye. All right, that's it for us. I appreciate Harlan being with me today. Harlan, great job. We'll definitely have him back. Make sure that you share this with everybody. Let them hear the podcast. Let them see the podcast. And make sure that you tell people the Democrat turned conservative, Harlan Hill, had a lot to offer to people in the United States about why they should be voting for Donald J. Trump. Great interview, Harlan. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody from Team DML listening and watching today. And I give you my blessings. God bless you, to you and your family, and to these United States. And God bless Harlan Hill, his pregnant wife, his newborn son, and his little girl on the way. God willing, we'll be back with you tomorrow. Same time, same bat channel. Talk to you soon.
Get the Dennis Michael Lynch podcast every day by subscribing on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and download the DML News app from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store for breaking news, merchandise, films, exclusive content, and Team DML.